I'm not sure what hit harder, the sound of her voice or the diamond bracelet catching the hotel light in the background. "Don't worry," she said, raising a champagne glass with a smirk. "You'll land on your feet." I did. In that moment, watching my wife of 18 years, Rachel, laugh from a luxury suite I'd never seen before, everything fell into place. She had emptied our retirement account, all $180,000, and she wasn't in Portland visiting her sister like she claimed. She was with him. But if she thought she'd won, she'd forgotten one thing. I'm not the kind of man who leaves his future to chance. What happened next left her stunned, and by the end of this video, it just might leave you speechless too. My name's Ethan Marlowe. I'm 46, a systems consultant living in Boise, Idaho, and 3 nights ago I watched the life I spent 2 decades building crumble in 40 seconds of video. I'd always been a planner, steady, quiet, methodical. Rachel used to laugh and say, "You plan, I live." It worked for a while. I made the money, she spent it. I focused on our future, and she made sure our present looked shiny. But now that shine was just cheap gloss peeling back to reveal the truth. The modern furniture, the designer kitchen, the art, I never chose. It was all hers. I was just the scaffolding. And when she was done, she didn't just walk away. She cashed out the safety net I built for him. But what she didn't know was while she was playing her game, I was playing mine. And mine was built on facts, not feelings. What I did next, let's just say, Rachel's little exit strategy, had a fatal flaw. Keep watching because this story is about to take a turn she never saw coming. I met Rachel when we were both 28. She walked into a corporate networking event like she owned the room, radiant smile, perfectly styled hair, a voice that slid between charm and command like it was second nature. She was in pharmaceutical sales back then, selling optimism in pill form. I was managing IT infrastructure for a regional bank, more comfortable around servers than small talk. Still, she made the first move. "You look like someone who builds things," she said, swirling a drink in one hand. I replied, "And you look like someone who burns them down." She laughed, and 6 months later we were married. For the first few years, we fit like puzzle pieces. I handled the finances, spreadsheets, savings plans, quarterly rebalancing of retirement accounts. Rachel brought the energy weekend getaways, dinner parties, and a social circle that helped me land larger consulting gigs than I ever could have alone. "You plan, I live," she used to say with a kiss on the cheek, like it was an even trade. And for a while, it was. I bought our house when the market dipped, locked in a sub-4% interest rate, maxed out both our Roth IRAs, bought tech stocks before the 2018 boom. We weren't rich, but we were solid, comfortable, safe, stable. But somewhere along the way, Rachel changed. Or maybe I just started seeing her clearly. The first real crack showed 5 years ago. I was filing receipts, reviewing our credit card statements, something I did every month. A $3,000 charge at a boutique jewelry store downtown stood out. It wasn't near our anniversary, my birthday, or even Christmas. I asked her about it. She didn't flinch. "It's for my mom," she said, reaching for her wine. "A milestone birthday." I nodded. Didn't ask questions. But when her mother visited 3 months later, she wasn't wearing anything new. In fact, she wasn't even aware it had been a milestone birthday. I should have seen it then, but I wanted to believe her. Believing her kept things easier, quieter. Then came the late nights, work dinners with no follow-up stories, trips to see friends that got extended by an extra day without notice, new clothes I hadn't seen her buy, a personal trainer she started texting after 10 p.m. When she got home from these trips, she smelled different. Not perfume, energy. She carried herself like someone who had just won a prize, and I started to feel like the consolation. Still, I stayed silent. Instead of confronting her, I started preparing. I took on a major consulting contract with a company called Cloud FIT, about 3 years ago. It was lucrative and gave me the excuse to create a separate LLC for liability purposes, but I used it for more than that. I began shifting our retirement assets slowly, carefully, into accounts tied to the LLC. Rachel had to sign paperwork along the way, and she always did. Just tell me where to sign, she'd say, flipping through the documents without reading a single line. It was the one area of our marriage where she trusted me completely. That blind trust became the firewall that would save me. 8 months ago, I noticed new patterns. Small withdrawals from our joint checking account. $80 here, $150 there. Then larger ones, $500, then $100, then $2,000. When I asked, she waved me off. Just online shopping, she said. You work so much. It helps me feel less lonely. I didn't argue. I made a note. And the next day I moved more funds into my business-linked accounts. Eventually, over 70% of our retirement was stored where she couldn't touch it. One night just last month, she asked about our retirement fund. We were having dinner takeout like always. She didn't cook much anymore. How much do we have in there? She asked casually, scrolling through her phone. Are the beneficiaries still the same? Do you think we should update them? She smiled at something on her screen. I didn't ask what. I couldn't. That same night I saw it. The tennis bracelet. Diamond, elegant, expensive. Definitely not from me. Her wrist sparkled as she reached for her wine. And I knew. Every puzzle piece I'd avoided fitting together now sat in perfect alignment. This was the highlight. The moment the illusion shattered. The woman I had loved for nearly 2 decades was funding someone else's lifestyle with the money I had worked my whole life to build. I wasn't just watching my marriage unravel. I was watching my future get traded in for hotel rooms and high-end dinners I'd never be invited to. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Because by then I had already created a digital vault, scanned copies of every statement-signed document and transaction I'd need. And all I had to do was wait for her to make one final irreversible move. The truth was, I'd stopped being her husband months ago. I had become her safety net, and soon I wouldn't be either. She thought she had won. She thought I'd be too shocked, too paralyzed, too hurt to respond. But she didn't know that while she was planning her escape, I was building my defense. I just needed one more piece of evidence, and that final confirmation, the one that broke everything wide open, was only a few days away. 3 days after Rachel sent that video, the one where she toasted her new life with my retirement savings, my phone rang with a call from our bank. Mr. Marlowe, the representative, set her tone careful. We've detected unusual activity on your joint retirement account. Multiple withdrawal requests just below our daily verification threshold. Some were successful. I didn't flinch. I'm aware, I said. My wife attempted to liquidate the funds without my authorization. There was a pause. Then her voice changed from professional concern to immediate action. In that case, we'll need to file a fraud report and place an immediate freeze on the account. I agreed without hesitation. That single call, cold procedural, marked the true beginning of what Rachel never saw coming. I didn't get angry, not then. Instead, I walked into my home office, opened the locked drawer at the bottom of my desk, and pulled out a manila folder. Inside was every document I'd quietly gathered over the last 4 months. Account statements, scanned receipts, copies of paperwork. Rachel had signed without reading screenshots of suspicious purchases and logs of cash transfers. The digital version was already organized into a court-ready file. I had been patient, meticulous. If she wanted a war, I had been building my arsenal long before she even knew we were at odds. That evening, I opened the divorce paperwork I'd started drafting a year ago. At the time, it felt paranoid, too cold, too calculated. Now it felt necessary. I updated the dates filled in the details she had so graciously confirmed in her video and saved the file under a new name, Final. By morning, I would send it to my lawyer. I was done, hesitating. Then came the texts, dozens of them, first playful, then frantic. "Hey, did you get my message? Why is the account frozen? The bank says something about fraud. What's going on?" I ignored everyone. My attorney had warned me minimum contact, maximum documentation. I followed it to the letter, and as the hours passed, her tone changed again from urgency to desperation. On the fourth morning at 7:12 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rachel standing there in yesterday's makeup, hair frizzy, shirt wrinkled. The woman from the hotel video was gone. This one looked like she hadn't slept. "What did you do?" she barked, pushing past me into the foyer. I didn't raise my voice. I reported unauthorized activity. The bank responded accordingly. "Unauthorized." She laughed, but it was brittle, hollow. "I'm your wife. I have every right." I nodded slowly. "Except the account requires dual authorization for withdrawals over $10,000. You forged my signature. That's fraud, Rachel." And then I saw it. The flicker in her eyes. Not fear. Calculation. She stepped closer, softened her voice. "Ethan, this is a misunderstanding." I was angry. I wasn't thinking clearly. "You were clear enough to empty the account, clear enough to pack your favorite clothes, clear enough to record that video." She reached for my arm. I pulled back. "I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served today. From here on out, our communication happens through lawyers." That was the moment she snapped. "You'd be nothing without me," she hissed. "I made you look successful. I built your network. You were a boring IT guy before me." I almost smiled. She didn't understand that her arrogance had blinded her to the only truth that mattered. I'd never stopped preparing. I wasn't just some boring IT guy. I was the man who saw the breach before the system collapsed. And yet I replied, "I managed to protect our assets from your little heist." That was the highlight, the moment the con fell apart. Rachel's eyes widened. The retirement account had over $800,000 in it. It had $180, I corrected, which the bank has now frozen under active fraud investigation. "What about the rest?" she asked, panic overtaking rage. Our total portfolio was over $1 million. "Exactly," I said. "And you never paid attention during financial discussions, did you?" She stumbled into the kitchen, pulled out her phone, and opened our bank app. I watched her scroll through login errors and access denials. "Where is it?" she whispered. "In accounts tied to my business, I said all signed off by you. You just didn't care enough to ask what you were signing." Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you trusted, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Tell us what they got wrong about you. She tried again. "James has money. He has connections." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then it sounds like you've landed on your feet. But you'll be doing it without my money, and possibly with a criminal record." She didn't respond. She just walked out. That afternoon I changed the locks. I changed every password, secured every file. And then I made the second most important call of that week. I contacted Jack Rivers, a forensic accountant I had worked with on a corporate fraud case years ago. "I need to trace financial activity over the last year," I told him. "And I need it documented for court." There was no emotion left in my voice, no anger, no heartbreak, just resolve. Rachel had made her choice. She rolled the dice. Now I was calling in the dealer, and what Jack uncovered next would change everything I thought I knew about who she was really working with. Jack Rivers didn't waste time. Within 48 hours of my call, we were seated in his downtown office, surrounded by soundproof walls, a glass carafe of black coffee between us, and a thick file already on his desk. Jack was meticulous, exactly the kind of man you'd want when truth needed to be stripped down to its bare bones. He adjusted his glasses and got right to it. "She's been moving money for a while, Ethan. Longer than you thought." I nodded slowly. I expected a few months, maybe a clever scheme here or there. What I didn't expect was a pattern. He slid a document across the table, highlighted lines, color-coded entries, every transaction logged with precision. "These transfers go back almost a year," he said. "Small amounts at first, $200, $400, just under your mobile notification thresholds. But then she got bolder. The amounts had climbed to thousands. One withdrawal was $4,950, made at 3:12 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Most of it went to luxury purchases, boutique retailers, high-end restaurants, spa resorts. But then there's this." He flipped to another page. "Roughly $20,000 has been transferred to a personal account at a different bank. Not in her name. Belongs to someone named James Whitaker." The name didn't ring any bells, but Jack had already anticipated that. James Whitaker, 41. Regional manager at Voxen Audio, lives in Seattle, divorced, no children. Here's the interesting part. He's had 2 previous relationships with married women. Both ended after large sums of money were transferred to him, and the marriages collapsed. He pulled up photos on his laptop, news clippings, court records, old social media posts. It was all there. A quiet pattern, manipulation disguised as charm, theft cloaked in romance. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a setup, a con. Rachel wasn't just having an affair. She was being used, or worse, she knew and didn't care. The man she ran off with wasn't some accidental escape from our life. He was a predator, and she handed him the keys to everything I had worked for. And here's where it got even darker. Jack pointed to the dates. These transfers to Whitaker's account began 3 months after he was hired at Voxen Audio. That's the same month your wife's pharmaceutical territory expanded to include Voxen's division. I sat back, stunned. I remembered Rachel's excitement at the time. New account, she'd said. Medical audio tech is the next frontier. She had more late-night meetings, more weekend conferences. She talked about innovation, about networking. It had all sounded legitimate until now. Jack turned the page again. We dug deeper. Found 2 other women. Same profile, both in sales, both with access to discretionary budgets. Both fell into financial ruin after their relationships with Whitaker ended. One woman had lost her house. The other filed for bankruptcy. And now it was happening again with Rachel, with me, with our money. If you were in my shoes, would you feel more betrayed by your spouse or by the stranger who targeted your life from the shadows? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt something colder, sharper. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. This was about stopping someone who made a business out of deception. "Does Rachel know?" I asked. Jack gave me a measured look. "Possibly. She might think it's just love. Or she might be complicit. That's unclear. What is clear is that your money has been funding him." That night I sat in the same home office where I'd built our financial future. I looked around and realized it had become a war room. I printed out every page Jack had sent me, sorted the folders, labeled the tabs, and began building the timeline. Transactions, texts, transfers, her video, his bank account. I saw it all now. Not a love story, but a calculated dismantling. And still a question lingered. Did Rachel truly believe in him, or was she just in too deep to pull herself out? The next morning I met with my attorney, Daniel Green, a sharp but calm presence in his high-rise office. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, slowly, his eyes narrowing. "This changes things significantly," he said. "We're no longer talking about divorce alone. We're talking about fraud, conspiracy, and possibly a criminal case." Daniel offered me 3 paths: pursue a clean divorce, and use the information to secure the best possible settlement, file criminal charges against both Rachel and Whitaker, or use the evidence as leverage to negotiate and possibly recover the money quietly. I asked about Whitaker's past victims. If he's done this before, I said he'll do it again. Daniel nodded. Then we reach out. If they're willing to share what they know, it makes our case stronger. And just like that, the personal became public. This wasn't just my battle anymore. It was about a pattern that needed to be broken. 2 of Whitaker's previous targets agreed to cooperate. They sent financial records, written statements, and timelines that matched mine to the day. Everything fit. Every lie, every dollar, every late-night call. That evening I watched Rachel's video one last time. The champagne, the bracelet, the laugh. I saw it now not as confidence, but as borrowed time. Her victory speech was just the beginning of her unraveling. And James Whitaker. He had no idea what was coming for him, because when you dismantle a man's life for profit, you better pray he never finds the blueprint. And I had it. Every line, every flaw, every crack, waiting to split wide open. What came next wasn't just about justice. It was about accountability, and my next move would make sure they both felt it. The evidence was stacked, organized, time-stamped, and real. With 2 of Whitaker's previous victims backing our case, we had built something larger than a personal betrayal. We were uncovering a pattern of financial predation. The documents they provided matched mine almost perfectly. Similar amounts, similar excuses, nearly identical timelines. One woman had even received the same model of diamond bracelet Rachel showed off in her video. Another had signed paperwork she didn't understand, thinking it was part of a business partnership. In both cases, the aftermath was financial devastation and emotional wreckage. I reached out to our bank's fraud department and requested a formal meeting. I presented them with everything Jack and Daniel had helped assemble: forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, connections to known victims of James Whitaker. The woman reviewing my file took her glasses off halfway through and whispered, "This is bigger than a domestic dispute." She excused herself from the room to call her supervisor. When she returned, they promised to escalate the case immediately and open a secondary investigation focused not just on Rachel, but on Whitaker and the suspicious transfers tied to his account. This level of sophistication suggests intent, she said. We'll notify our legal team and your state's Attorney General office. But I wasn't done. I submitted an anonymous tip to Voxen Audio's corporate compliance division. In the message, I included enough breadcrumbs to guide their internal investigators toward Whitaker's transactions without revealing my identity. I'd worked in corporate IT long enough to know how these systems flagged inconsistencies, and I knew how to plant a trail that would set those systems in motion. By now, Rachel had gone silent. No texts, no calls, no emails. But silence, I've learned, is never still. It's just the sound of panic, waiting to decide which mask to wear next. I spent the next several days preparing. I backed up every document 3 ways. 3, I created a secured drive for my lawyer. I replaced every lock in the house and made sure anything that held sentimental value or confidential data was secured in storage. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a crime scene waiting for legal resolution. Then something shifted. 7 days after our last contact, Rachel broke the silence. Her first message was carefully worded. "I think we need to talk. It's important." The next followed an hour later. "I've made a mistake. I need to explain." And then more desperate. "There are things about James you don't know." She showed up at my office building 2 days later, waiting by the front entrance like a shadow I had outpaced. I walked past her, but she stepped into stride beside me. "Ethan, she said, breath short, eyes puffy. He lied about everything. I kept walking, but something about her voice made me pause. It wasn't the usual manipulation. It wasn't rehearsed. It sounded like someone who had been dropped mid-air and just realized no one was catching her. I just found out from one of his exes, she said. He's done this before, with other women. I turned slowly. I know I said. So does the bank. So does our lawyer. So does Voxon's internal compliance team. Her face went pale. You knew I had a forensic accountant trace every dollar you moved into his account, $87,000 to be exact. We've built a timeline, connected the pattern. We have sworn testimony. You helped fund a con artist, whether you meant to or not. She looked like she might collapse. Ethan, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I shook my head gently. That's the thing, Rachel. I don't have to believe anything anymore. That's the one benefit of all this. It was a clean break. There were no more emotional hooks left to pull me back. Whatever she'd hoped to recover dignity, trust, control, it wasn't coming from me. If you were in my place, would you have let her speak? Would you have believed she was also a victim, or would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand. Later that night, I met with Daniel and handed him the full recording of our conversation. She's losing control, he said, and Whitaker's facade is cracking too. Voxon's investigation is underway. The bank's flagged every suspicious transfer. We have leverage now, not just in divorce court, but criminally. Daniel explained that Rachel had two options: cooperate and mitigate her legal exposure, or hold firm and risk being charged alongside Whitaker. She'll flip, he said. They always do when the structure starts to burn. But for me, it wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone. I was trying to reclaim the life I had quietly and faithfully built. I had no appetite for cruelty, just truth. That's what made what happened next so unexpected. Just as we finalized our evidence strategy, Jack called me with something new. Something I hadn't seen coming, and something Rachel surely never intended for anyone to find. Jack's voice was calm, but I could tell he'd found something serious. Ethan, he said, you might want to sit down for this. He rarely spoke like that. He was a numbers guy, straightforward, clinical, but whatever he had discovered, it cut deeper than balance sheets or transaction logs. I sat at my kitchen counter, the one Rachel had insisted we upgrade with marble from Italy. $1,000 per square foot, and now just another surface for bad memories. Jack continued. I ran a secondary audit, digging into the metadata on the forged withdrawal forms. Something didn't sit right. I had them analyzed by a document specialist. There was a pause. They weren't forged by Rachel alone. My stomach dropped. You mean James coached her through it? I asked. Worse, he replied. They were filled out using software typically used by financial consultants, very specific formatting. It mimics official bank templates, but with subtle structural errors that can evade detection unless you know exactly what to look for. Whitaker didn't just help. He executed it. The same formatting shows up in both of his past cases. It was premeditated. Not a woman led astray, not a crime of passion. It was a scheme with infrastructure, a practiced routine. Rachel had become part of something systematic, maybe even organized. This wasn't just about your retirement fund, Jack added. This was about dismantling your life with precision. I pulled up my copy of the withdrawal documents. I'd looked at them a dozen times, but now I noticed what Jack pointed out. The alignment of the header was slightly off the font weight, inconsistent with the bank's standard format. Most people wouldn't notice, but someone like me, who spent years auditing data flow and interface integrity, couldn't unsee it now. Here's the highlight. Jack discovered that one of the dummy email addresses used to receive verification links for the transfers was linked to an IP address traced back to Voxon's corporate VPN, which meant Whitaker wasn't just operating in the shadows. He used his employer's tools to cover his tracks. It wasn't just personal deception. It was corporate-level fraud. What would you do if someone infiltrated your life like this, not with guns or threats, but with charm and a laptop? Would you press charges or try to salvage what's left? Like and comment below. I want to hear how far you'd go. By now, everything was moving. My attorney had already filed motions to secure Rachel's financial records. With this new information, Daniel filed a formal fraud complaint with the state. We shared the findings with the DA's office and forwarded the Voxon IP data to their compliance team. The weight of evidence was growing faster than I expected. But even as momentum built, part of me sat with the question that wouldn't go away. Did Rachel know I replayed our last conversation in my head? Her voice shaking, telling me James lied. Her face, when I told her we'd already traced the money. There was panic, yes. But was it guilt or fear of being caught? The next morning, Daniel called. "She's agreed to meet with me," he said, privately, without Whitaker. "She says she wants to talk options." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to feel. Relief, satisfaction, or just emptiness. Rachel had always been quick on her feet. Sales was her language. She knew how to read a room, when to lean in, when to look wounded, when to deliver the line that cracked someone's shell. That talent now felt like a weapon that had turned inward. Daniel met with her the following afternoon and came back with a summary I didn't expect. "She's willing to cooperate," he said. "Full disclosure, full financial transparency in exchange for reduced liability. She's scared, genuinely. She says she didn't know about the others, that she believed James loved her, that she thought this was their fresh start. But the moment she realized he was using her, she panicked, and now she's trying to claw her way out. Was she telling the truth, or just playing her final hand? That night, I walked through the house again. For the first time in months, I really looked at it, not for what it had become, but for what it used to be. The hallway where we hung photos from our trip to Jackson Hole. The bar cart she insisted we get because every adult house needs one. The spot near the fireplace where I proposed quietly without a big speech. Just two people who thought they had time. That version of us was gone. What remained now was strategy, evidence, and leverage. And if Rachel wanted out, it was going to come at a cost. The next day we scheduled a mediation, but just as the paperwork was being prepared, Jack called again with one final piece that would shift the case entirely. Jack didn't usually call twice in the same week, let alone 2 days in a row. When his name lit up my screen again, I picked up immediately. I found something he said, something buried. His tone was different this time, not just factual but uneasy, as if what he discovered pushed this whole situation into darker territory. "Go on," I said. Jack explained that while double-checking the metadata on the forged withdrawal documents, he noticed a hidden layer of access logs, digital breadcrumbs, from someone logging into financial files remotely. The access didn't come from Rachel's devices, he said. It came from a third IP address, one masked by a proxy, but I was able to triangulate its source through 2 open ports, left unsecured. He paused. The activity originated inside Voxon's internal network, not just through a VPN this time, but from a corporate machine. And here's the kicker, it belongs to someone listed as James Whitaker's assistant, a woman named Emily Chan. I didn't recognize the name, but Jack had pulled her employment records, online presence, and more importantly, her LinkedIn profile. "She's not just an assistant," Jack continued. She's an internal auditor. Her role is to review contracts and vendor payments, and she has administrative clearance. My thoughts moved fast. If Whitaker had access to Voxen's systems through her, or worse, if she was involved, then the scheme extended beyond Rachel. It was a network. Here's the highlight. Jack found that Emily Chan had been flagged internally once before in an inquiry about unauthorized data access during a third-party audit last year. The case was closed quietly, no public record, but the timing lined up perfectly with when Whitaker started transferring money from one of his former victims. It wasn't just about stolen retirement funds anymore. This was a corporate fraud operation that had been active, quiet, and well-planned. If you suddenly found out your betrayal wasn't just personal, but part of an organized con, how would that change your response? Would you go public press, criminal charges? Let me know in the comments, because this is where the game changes. I forwarded everything Jack uncovered to Daniel. Within the hour, Daniel called me into his office. "This elevates the case," he said. "We're no longer just dealing with divorce and financial misconduct. This is multi-party conspiracy, and now we have a possible link to internal fraud at a major corporation." He began preparing a formal report to send to the state's Attorney General and the FBI's white-collar crime division. "We need to move quickly. If Voxen gets ahead of this, they'll protect themselves. But if we show them we're holding something bigger, they may cooperate." Rachel still hadn't been told about the Emily Chan connection. We kept that card close. Daniel suggested we use this leverage during mediation, an unspoken warning that if her cooperation failed, or if she attempted to conceal anything else, she could be implicated in a federal case. I didn't like the idea of threats, but at this point, the truth wasn't enough on its own. It needed muscle. The morning of mediation arrived. I wore a suit I hadn't touched in 2 years, the same one Rachel picked out for a business dinner that turned into a client deal. I remember how proud she looked that night, how she toasted to teamwork, like we were partners in something that mattered. The man who walked into the legal office that day didn't feel like her partner. He felt like her reckoning. Rachel arrived late. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup understated. No ring. She looked tired but alert, like someone who knew the ground beneath her was giving way. Her lawyer greeted mine, and we moved into a private conference room where the terms of settlement were to be discussed. Financial disclosures, property division, debt responsibilities, standard procedure. But nothing about this was standard. Daniel began with a calm, firm summary of the evidence. He emphasized cooperation. He made it clear that criminal charges were still avoidable. Rachel sat in silence, listening. Then she pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. Everything she said. Emails, texts, photos. I didn't know how deep it went until last week, but I kept copies. I didn't delete anything. I couldn't. Daniel took the drive, looked at me, and nodded. We reviewed the contents later that day. Inside were hundreds of messages between her and Whitaker, some romantic, many financial. There were instructions, transfer confirmations, conversations, where James reassured her that no one ever finds this stuff if it's under 10K. But there was more. There were threads where Emily Chan's name appeared. "M will run the document through Vox." One message read, "Don't worry, she'll make it clean." That was the missing link confirmation that Whitaker wasn't acting alone. As I scrolled through the messages, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I felt something colder than anger. Clarity. Rachel had been manipulated, yes, but she had also crossed a line and kept walking, and now she was standing on the edge of a cliff, finally looking down. The next step was obvious. With the flash drive in hand and the pieces in place, we prepared to meet with federal investigators. But before that, Daniel made one final call to Voxen's legal counsel. What came out of that conversation would finally pull Whitaker into the light. Daniel's call to Voxon's legal department lasted just under 6 minutes, but when he hung up, everything changed. "They want to meet," he said. Immediately, off the record. It wasn't surprising. By now they had to know the walls were closing in. Our evidence linked their employee to an internal data breach and potential conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Corporations don't wait to be exposed. They act fast to get ahead of the fallout. The next morning, we were ushered into a high-rise downtown conference room with a panoramic view of the city. A woman in a gray suit introduced herself as Voxon's general counsel. Beside her sat their director of corporate security and a third man who didn't speak until much later. Daniel placed a printed copy of our summary report on the table and opened with a simple sentence. "We believe your company's network was used in the facilitation of financial crimes." No one interrupted. He laid out the timeline. The forged withdrawal forms the linked IP addresses, the employee access logs from Emily Chan, and the series of monetary transfers that pointed to James Whitaker as the orchestrator. Then the flash drive, Rachel's texts, the emails, the messages referencing M, and data laundering through Voxon's infrastructure. For 20 minutes the room was silent, except for Daniel's voice. Here's the highlight. After reviewing the drive for only a few minutes, Voxon's legal counsel stood and left the room. When she returned, her demeanor had changed. "We'll be placing Mr. Whitaker and Ms. Chan on immediate administrative leave," she said, "and we'll be conducting a full internal audit with an outside firm." The director of corporate security added, "We appreciate that you brought this to us first. We'd prefer to avoid the press. What would it take for you to delay going public?" Daniel didn't commit to anything. "This is already in motion," he said. "The state and federal authorities are involved. We brought it here because the consequences of not doing so could be worse for everyone." They understood. Corporations always do when reputation is on the line. On the elevator ride down, I felt strangely weightless, not victorious, not relieved, just light. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the burden alone. The truth was now in the hands of people who couldn't ignore it, people with power, people with obligation. And James Whitaker. He would soon realize the game he'd played so well had finally met its end. Later that day, we submitted a formal briefing to the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. The assistant U.S. attorney assigned to the case asked for every digital file, every signed affidavit, and full cooperation from the bank the victims, and now Voxon. It wasn't just a personal matter anymore. It was federal. That night, Rachel sent one final message. I told them everything she wrote. If there's anything left to fix, I'll do it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left between us but legal threads and the long tail of consequences. I didn't hate her. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was harder to explain, something like clarity mixed with distance, like I'd already moved on while the storm still raged around me. If someone betrayed you this deeply but later cooperated to bring down the person who used them, would you forgive them? Or is some trust too shattered to rebuild? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and let me know where you stand. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Rachel's full cooperation helped prosecutors uncover more victims. 3 other women had transferred large sums to accounts controlled by Whitaker, nearly identical stories. All of them felt special, chosen, loved. All of them ended up broken, financially and emotionally. When the federal charges were drafted, they included wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. James Whitaker's name appeared first, Emily Chan's second. Rachel's was listed as a cooperating party with limited civil liability. The morning the indictment was unsealed, I received a call from Daniel. "It's official," he said. "Federal agents served warrants this morning. Whitaker was taken into custody at his condo in Seattle. Chan was picked up at Voxen HQ. Rachel won't be charged criminally, but she'll testify." I let out a slow breath. "It's done," I said. "Not yet," Daniel replied. "Now comes the hearing, and you'll be in the same room as both of them." That sentence stayed with me long after I hung up. I tried to imagine what it would feel like standing across from the man who almost stole my future, and the woman who handed him the key. But some things, no matter how much you rehearse them in your mind, don't feel real until the moment arrives, and mine was coming fast. The courthouse smelled like old wood and filtered air, sterile, formal, heavy with expectation. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit I hadn't worn since the last wedding Rachel and me attended together. It barely fit. My shoulders had changed, or maybe it was just the weight of everything I carried into that room. Daniel met me at the security checkpoint, come as always, holding a slim leather folder with everything we needed. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded once. I was ready, but I wasn't steady. Not yet. The courtroom itself was smaller than I expected. Rows of polished benches, a modest judge's bench raised just enough to make you feel seen, but not far enough to make you feel safe. When the bailiff called our case, I turned toward the door as Rachel and James entered together. That was the first surprise. They weren't supposed to be seated side by side, yet there they were, James, with a legal team that looked expensive and disinterested. Rachel, pale eyes, down hair pulled back tight, like she was trying to disappear. He looked annoyed. She looked defeated. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with silver-framed glasses and a presence that demanded attention, called the session to order. "This court is reviewing a petition for divorce and the related allegations of financial misconduct and fraud," she began. Then she paused and looked directly at James. "Mr. Whitaker, it has come to the court's attention that your name appears not only in these proceedings but in multiple active investigations." He leaned in to whisper to his attorney. His confidence had cracked. "Here's the highlight." Daniel stood and submitted our final evidence file, a comprehensive binder of bank statements, forged withdrawal forms, testimony from victims, screenshots of the Voxen access logs, and excerpts from Rachel's text exchanges. He concluded by submitting one final item, a signed affidavit from one of Whitaker's former victims who had been too afraid to testify in person, but who had written a detailed account of how he had done the same thing to her 3 years ago in Denver with another woman in medical sales. "The pattern is unmistakable, Your Honor," Daniel said. "This isn't a personal grievance. This is a career built on financial manipulation." The judge flipped through the documents, one page at a time, in silence. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Whitaker," she said sharply, "this court has enough evidence to refer your conduct for criminal investigation. Whether or not your employer chooses to press charges, the state may still pursue its own." James's posture tightened, his jaw locked. Rachel flinched beside him. "Mrs. Marlowe," the judge continued, "this court acknowledges your cooperation and the role you played in uncovering this case. However, you are not absolved. Your negligence and participation allowed these events to unfold. You will be held financially accountable, as outlined in the divorce settlement. Do you think that was fair? Should someone who cooperated, but participated in the fraud, still be responsible for restitution? Comment below your opinions. Might surprise more people than you think." The court froze. All disputed marital assets authorized ongoing discovery for any hidden funds, and granted me the primary right to manage and distribute any recovered accounts. Rachel would make restitution payments over time, a figure determined by the court, based on her income and the portion she transferred under Whitaker's influence. James was ordered to surrender his passport and appear in federal court within 30 days. After the hearing adjourned, I walked outside into the cold afternoon sun. It felt sharper than usual, almost metallic. I had expected anger, maybe a sense of triumph, but instead I felt emptied out, like the fight had drained something I wasn't sure I'd get back. Closure doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just arrives quietly, like an echo fading down a hallway. Rachel walked out minutes later, alone this time. She stopped near the courthouse steps, her face unreadable. We made eye contact for a brief second. She mouthed something, maybe I'm sorry, maybe not. I didn't respond. Some things can be acknowledged without being accepted. James didn't come out. His lawyers lingered behind closed doors, most likely crafting damage control. That wouldn't save him. Later that night, Daniel called me with an update. Federal prosecutors have already drafted the formal indictment. Voxon's internal report confirms multiple violations of corporate policy and security breach protocols. Whitaker will be terminated. Emily Chan is cooperating, but she's on administrative leave pending review. One chapter of my life had been dismantled, but the next one, unexpected, raw, uncertain, was already beginning to form. And just as I started to catch my breath, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. The message was from Andrea. I hadn't seen her name on my phone since before everything fell apart. We'd gone on 3 quiet, easy dates nearly a year ago. She was a project manager I met through a mutual client, smart self, contained with the kind of energy that didn't ask for attention, but earned it anyway. Back then I wasn't ready. I thought I was. I smiled, I held conversations, but inside, I was still living under Rachel's shadow, still counting how much of myself had been lost in the silence between us. Her message was simple. Hey, just heard about everything. You okay? I stared at the screen for a few minutes before typing back. Better now. I didn't know what else to say. It was the truth, even if it didn't feel complete. She replied instantly, "Want to grab coffee sometime?" No pressure, no agenda, just a quiet offering. That night I sat in the living room of the apartment I'd moved into after selling the house. It was smaller, quieter mine. No more granite countertops I never chose, no more framed prints of places I didn't care about. Just clean walls, a worn leather chair, a window with a view of the skyline. I poured a glass of bourbon and let the stillness settle in. Rachel's restitution payments had officially started. $600 a month for the next 12 years. The amount didn't matter. What mattered was the accountability, the structure. I could rebuild. I had already started. Voxon's internal scandal had gone public. Whitaker's mugshot hit the news, followed by a string of interviews with victims now willing to speak out. One of them emailed me directly, thanking me. She said, "You didn't just stop him. You reminded the rest of us we weren't crazy. That was the highlight. The first moment I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about every person who had been gaslit, manipulated, drained emotionally and financially by someone who wore trust like a costume. I'd exposed a pattern, not just of fraud, but of power abused under the guise of love. Have you ever been made to feel like the bad guy for noticing red flags? Like you were too careful or too suspicious, only to later realize your instincts were dead on? If so, hit like and tell your story in the comments. I want this to be a space for people who've walked through fire and come out smarter. Daniel called again that week with the final breakdown of what I'd managed to recover. Between the frozen retirement assets, the LLC accounts, and seized funds from Whitaker's holdings. I reclaimed roughly 85% of what Rachel had tried to liquidate. Not perfect, but more than I ever expected. "You played this brilliantly," Daniel said. "Most people never see it coming. Even fewer come out ahead." It wasn't pride, I felt. It was something quieter. Dignity, maybe. The ability to look in the mirror and know I hadn't become bitter, just better prepared. And as I stood there brushing my teeth that evening, I noticed something strange. My reflection didn't look tired anymore. Andrea and I did meet for that coffee. It turned into dinner, then another. This time I was different. I wasn't distracted or guarded. I didn't feel the need to explain everything. I just listened. We talked about small things, work stress, favorite cities, her dog, my old record player. She asked if I believed in starting over. I said I did if you were willing to leave the old rules behind. We didn't rush anything. We weren't teenagers chasing dopamine. We were adults, bruised but still standing. We knew what it meant to carry history and what it meant to build trust with both hands open. But in the middle of all this calm, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A manila envelope. No return address. Just my name, typed, centered, sealed. I opened it slowly, expecting court documents or a leftover detail from the bank. But what I found inside wasn't financial at all. It was a letter, handwritten, neat, deliberate cursive. And it wasn't from Rachel. It was from someone I didn't expect to hear from at all. The handwriting was unfamiliar and elegant, almost formal, like something from another time. I turned the letter over in my hands, once before unfolding it. No signature on the front, just one line. "You don't know me, but you should." The first sentence stopped me cold. My name is Melissa Green. James Whitaker ruined my life, too. I sank into the leather chair by the window as I kept reading. Melissa was from Austin, Texas. She had worked for a surgical supply company and met Whitaker at a medical conference in Chicago. He was charming, well-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested in her work. Their relationship moved quickly, just like it had with Rachel. Same pattern. Long calls late into the night, spontaneous trips, promises of a future, whispered plans of shared business ventures. I wired him just under $90,000, the letter read. He told me he was starting his own consulting firm and needed bridge financing. Said he couldn't get it through traditional banks without triggering conflict of interest rules with Voxon. I believed him. He said I'd be the foundation of everything we were going to build together. 2 months later, he ghosted her. Emails bounced back. His phone went straight to voicemail, and just like that, he vanished. She contacted his employer. They claimed no knowledge of his side dealings, filed a police report, but without physical threats or proof of deception, the case went nowhere. It was like screaming into the wind, she wrote. Until I saw your name on the news. I recognized the details, the withdrawals, the manipulation, the pattern. You weren't just another victim. You cracked it open. That was the highlight. This wasn't a ripple anymore, it was a wave. A full pattern of behavior, so detailed, so predictable, that it could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Melissa enclosed copies of her wire transfers, dated texts, even screenshots of the pitch deck Whitaker had used to sell her on the business. Same file name Rachel had sent me months ago. Same template, same lies. Have you ever connected with a stranger through shared betrayal? Someone who helped you realize you weren't crazy, just early to the truth. If you've been there, hit like or comment below. Someone else might need to read what you have to say. I forwarded Melissa's letter and documentation to Daniel, who looped in the federal prosecutor. The case file against Whitaker grew thicker by the day, and with each new piece his margin for escape got smaller. Daniel called the letter a gift, not just for its legal value, but for its emotional clarity. "This guy doesn't change his methods," he said. "That's why we can break him. But it wasn't just about James anymore. Melissa's words lingered in my mind for days. We always think we're the only ones until someone else speaks up. That was the part that hit hardest. Not the money, not the courtrooms, but the loneliness that came with being deceived by someone who knew exactly how to make you feel seen. I responded to Melissa, thanked her, told her the evidence she provided would be used in court. She replied a few days later. Even if nothing comes of it legally, I'm grateful. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I imagined the whole thing. The emotional weight of everything, Rachel's betrayal, James's scheme, the financial recovery, the court hearings, even Andrea's quiet re-entry into my life. It all began to feel strangely balanced, like I could finally breathe evenly again. The chaos was still there, but it wasn't mine to manage anymore. It was in folders in the hands of attorneys in the sights of federal investigators. On a quiet Friday morning, I got a message from Daniel. Trial date has been set. James has entered a plea not guilty. We move forward. The last phase was coming. Testimony, witness statements, and the moment where every lie would be read aloud in a courtroom packed with strangers and silence. That evening, I stood by my kitchen window watching the last light stretch across the skyline. Below, people moved through their lives without knowing anything about mine, and I felt something unfamiliar peace. Not the naive kind, not the kind built on forgetting, the kind that only comes when you've walked through fire and you're still standing, not untouched, but not undone either. The next time I'd see James Whitaker, it would be in front of a judge, and this time he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of the truth. The courtroom was quiet as the final verdict was read. James Whitaker, guilty on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. His face was unreadable, but his future was sealed. As for Rachel, she testified clearly and honestly. I could see the weight of her choices on her shoulders, and though I'll never fully understand what drove her, I recognized the fear in her voice. Fear of what she became. Fear of what she lost. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt sitting there in that worn wooden chair was closure. Life didn't return to normal, it became something new. I learned that healing isn't loud. It's not a dramatic turning point or a single moment of relief. It's in the quiet decisions you make every day, choosing peace over bitterness, choosing clarity over blame. I rebuilt my consulting business. I traveled more. I saw friends I hadn't called in years. And Andrea and I kept seeing each other slowly, honestly, without rushing into definitions. We were two people walking forward, no longer trying to erase the past, but letting it rest where it belonged. Looking back, I don't regret being the man who trusted first, but I'm proud I became the man who learned to protect himself too. Because love, real love, should never cost you your dignity, your security, or your voice. It should never come with silence as its price. If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Did it teach you something about your own strength? Let's start a conversation, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to this channel. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're reminders that we're not alone, that even in our darkest chapters there's a path to light. Every subscription helps grow this community of truth seekers, survivors, and voices that deserve to be heard. Because your story, like mine, might just be what someone else needs to find their way back.